Hi, this is Brent Grover speaking from Evergreen Consulting for Advanced Supply Chain Software powered by IBIS. This month's topic is optimizing product availability, and this week's conversation is about part 4 of the subject of you can't sell from an empty wagon. So my first question each week is, what is your company's approach as a wholesale distributor to the subject of inventory availability? Is your primary focus on creating the perfect order? Do you have a program in place to do so? Are you in the category of working on it but not quite there yet? Or on the other hand, is your primary focus on inventory turns with less emphasis on the so-called perfect order? Okay, so how do the very best wholesale distributors manage the balance between the need to turn inventory and the need to provide outstanding customer service through inventory availability? So this week, I want to focus on the investment in technology and training that makes this possible with the very best companies in the wholesale distribution industry. The topic of technology is a sensitive one because it requires both capital investment and investment of human resources. Most of the ERP systems that wholesale distributors use today are really pretty good at managing inventory. They have inventory modules that are pretty powerful, but I would also say that typically they are underutilized. I want to mention the name Gordon Graham in case you don't know who he is, or perhaps you know the name but you don't know exactly what Gordon Graham did. Years ago, that is in the late 1970s, early 1980s, Gordon Graham put together in a book or a couple of books that were very popular, widely read at that time, books about inventory management for wholesale distribution. And this was at the time of the introduction of mini computer systems for wholesale distributors, which was a big departure from the manual systems that were used at that time to manage inventory, what were often called Cardex systems, which were actually just manual posting of inventory transactions as they went through the company's processes. And somebody would literally add inventory that came in from vendors and subtract inventory that went out to customers, and those were the only records the wholesale distributor had. Well, when the mini computers came along, of course, with software solutions for the inventory management problem, Gordon Graham addressed the science of inventory management with terms that were new to many wholesale distributors, terms such as carrying cost, replenishment cost, lead time variations from vendors, safety stock, other computations that were done automatically by the computer systems. Now, in order to get some standardization and wide acceptance of these computer modules for inventory management, Gordon Graham, the author of the books, was willing to review software systems and sign off on them as being in compliance with his methodology. And that is the basis of many of the systems that wholesale distributors use today, because the systems most companies use today are the, if you will, they're the grandchildren of the software systems that were developed in the late 70s and early 80s. So running these systems, which I've already mentioned are pretty much underutilized by most wholesale distributors, running them on autopilot is not a great idea. But unfortunately, what I've often seen as a consultant is that wholesale distributors use the default settings in these systems without tweaking them too much to the needs of their business. And instead of using the dynamic features of these systems, they tend to use static information, basically duplicating the simplicity of what was used with those old Cardex systems in some ways. The individual SKUs or stock keeping units need to be coded with their own specific characteristics in order for the system to manage those SKUs dynamically. And also the rules from each vendor, which have to do with the optimum order quantities for the best price as opposed to economical order quantity, or EOQ, as computed by a formula. The vendor rules need to be current and kept current in the system. So it's not a good idea to run the system on autopilot, no matter how good the system is. Another shortfall that we see from many wholesale distributors is the tendency to let the staff, the clerical staff who do the replenishment, override the values that are in that system. And for example, they'll revert to the minimum, maximum, or min-max values, which are the easiest ones to understand, but they're the least useful in terms of optimizing customer service and maximizing inventory turnover. The system, if the system's set on min-max, it ignores all the dynamically calculated information, or most of it. Temporary settings that staff puts in the system to meet particular situations are often not updated. They're not managed carefully. And oftentimes pressure from the outside or even the inside sales reps will cause the inventory replenishment staff to use settings that are not really realistic, but they're assuring the fact that the company probably won't run out of inventory. And this is a management comment, but for most of the inventory replenishment staff, the consequences of a stock out are much more severe. They're much more serious for the inventory replenishment person than the consequences for overstocks. So if in doubt, they'll have too much inventory because they get in trouble if they don't. Also, there's the distinction between stock and non-stock items. That's a decision that has to be made by management or by staff, and oftentimes information about stock items is covered up, if you will, by turning them into non-stock items, so they're excluded from the service calculations, which is really, of course, it's cheating the system, if you will. And the last thing I want to bring up about management, and this is all in the context of technology and training, is that for many of these systems, the new item setup is extremely tedious, extremely difficult. Many times that can be simplified to the extent necessary. As Einstein says, simplify everything but as much as possible, but not more so. So you don't want to overdo it, but the workload in an inventory replenishment department fluctuates widely. As a result, there's a lot of pressure to get things done. There's more emphasis on speed than on accuracy in many companies. And finally, the entry-level staff is often not well trained and is not closely enough supervised to get the job done properly. So the rapid improvement, just to sum things up, the rapid improvement wholesale distributors have seen in inventory management in the last 10 or more years is attributable largely to technology. That's the main reason. But the technology, I would argue, is still very much underutilized. Most of our ERP systems have pretty strong features going back to the Gordon Grant principles, but the training behind the use of these systems is not given enough emphasis. And finally, the advanced inventory management systems that are out there with a well-trained staff and good management, they create competitive advantages that will be sustainable. In our view, they will be sustainable over the long run. So till next time, this is Brent Grover for Advanced Supply Chain Software, powered by IBIS, and we'll look forward to seeing you soon.